I caught my wife in the act of pleading with my friend for sex, and now my parents have taken her side, allowing her to stay in the house where I grew up. Last night, after 7 years of marriage, my wife decided to unwind. After dinner, she retreated to the den to watch her favorite shows, while I moved between enjoying the Spurs football game and tackling some miscellaneous tasks I had planned. Suddenly, she brought out the wine and had consumed 2 bottles by around midnight. Concerned, I checked on her and found her completely passed out on the couch. As I reached to pick her up, her smartwatch buzzed, displaying a message that read something like, "I can't do that." My name was also mentioned in a way that suggested a strong negative reaction. Puzzled by the message, I tapped on it, revealing a conversation between my wife and a friend of mine. While this friend isn't exactly a close confidant, we've shared 5-a-sides over the years, enjoyed drinks together, and have known each other since our teenage years. We used to joke about calling him jacket holder, because, back in our youth, whenever we got into disputes, he'd always be the one holding the jackets while the rest of us went at it. As I delved deeper into the conversation on her watch, which remained attached to her wrist, I scrolled to the very beginning and noticed that he usually initiated contact with her, unless she had deleted messages. The exchange was filled with flirtatious remarks and subtle winks, though nothing overtly indicating infidelity, until last night. When intoxicated, my wife began openly begging him for sex. I was in utter disbelief. I can only approximate her exact words because my memory fails me, but she was expressing how much she had always desired him, insisting that no one would ever find out if he wanted to act on his desires. The final blow was her claim of being excellent at keeping secrets. I attempted to scroll through her watch messages but found no additional conversations, and without knowing her phone's passcode, I was left in the dark. I placed her gently in bed and sat in the kitchen, stunned, until exhaustion overcame me and I fell asleep. The next morning, I awoke around 5:30 to prepare for work. As I approached my work van, a wave of dread washed over me. I couldn't bring myself to face the situation. Instead, I returned home, grabbed a half-empty bottle of vodka mixed with Coke, and took a walk along the nearby railway line. Our home is nestled beside extensive woodland and an abandoned railway that stretches for miles. I walked halfway down the track and found myself sitting under a railway bridge, feeling like a disgruntled troll. The frustration within me was palpable, as if smoke were emanating from my ears. I grappled with what to do next. I couldn't bring myself to speak to her or even look at her after reading those heart-wrenching words. It felt like a dagger piercing my heart, causing every ounce of love I had for her to vanish into thin air. Her desperate pleas were utterly repulsive. I seriously considered disappearing from her life entirely, never speaking to her again. The phrase, "great at keeping secrets," struck a particularly raw nerve. Who is she, really? It stinks to the core. I was at a crossroads, contemplating how deep into this nightmare I wanted to descend. Honesty aside, I was simply done. Never before had I felt so betrayed and disgusted. I had invested so much in her, not just as a partner, but as a person. I loved her deeply, believing that her personality, and by extension mine, reflected that of a good person. Discovering she was a deceitful snake made me feel like a snake myself, a worse person than I had been the day before. It's akin to discovering that someone you admired and took life lessons from turned out to be a pedophile, a rapist, or a sheer creep. Your entire self-perception and identity would crumble because you had embraced their advice and invested time in them. I'm rambling now, and I apologize. Fortunately, our house is owned by my parents, who moved to a retirement village 6 years ago. We moved into the house, which will be inherited by me upon their passing. I have no intention of owning it for the foreseeable future, as they couldn't manage the upkeep and all the accompanying problems. They wanted to spend their final days in peace, so if we divorce, my soon-to-be ex won't gain any claim to the house. This left me pondering my next steps. I was seriously considering not uttering a single word and simply evicting her from the house. Additionally, while walking along the railway, the idea of asking my friend, a locksmith, to quietly change the locks crossed my mind. I could fabricate some excuse about a broken door, knowing she wouldn't care about the reason as long as I acted promptly. After the locks were changed, I could deceive her into coming out to inspect something in the backyard, only to lock the door behind me once she stepped out. It sounded juvenile, but I was desperate. Despite my serious demeanor, I wasn't sure what to do. I stared at a bottle of vodka, feeling like my life had been torn apart. As for that deceitful friend of mine, there was no doubt he had ulterior motives. I wouldn't have discovered this otherwise, so I was determined to confront him soon. No longer interested in holding jackets, he'd likely end up with his face held by his own actions. Then, 2 dog walkers came over to check on me as they noticed my distress. I explained everything to them, and the first thing one of them said was, "Son, the worst thing you can do right now is drink, it'll cause chaos." I owe them a debt of gratitude because, at that moment, I was on a one-way trip to hell. I discarded the vodka, contacted a friend, and he offered me a place to stay and calm down. Although he was at work, he directed me to the spare key. We live in a small town of about 15,000 people, and his place wasn't too far. Once there, I sat on his couch, trying to regain my composure. Throughout the morning, I received multiple texts and calls from my wife, inquiring about my whereabouts and what was happening, since my work van remained in the driveway and I was nowhere to be found. I responded, telling her there was an issue with the engine and that I had arranged a ride to work, which she seemed to accept, merely replying with an okay. When my friend returned from work around 5 o'clock, I confided in him about everything that had transpired and sought his advice. I also requested him not to mention jacket holder to anyone, fearing it might reach my wife, which I wanted to avoid for the time being. I planned to expose how deceitful he was later, but as of now, he was of no help. For those claiming he was innocent, it's clear he messaged my wife first and was extremely flirtatious. What was he even trying to achieve by contacting her? They barely knew each other, and the flirtation seemed one-sided from the start. I suspect they had encountered each other in public, leading to the flirty exchanges. My friend advised me to keep a low profile and gather more information while simultaneously consulting a lawyer to explore my options, which I did that day. By around 6 o'clock, I returned home, utterly exhausted from the day's adrenaline rush, which abruptly ceased, leaving me drained. As soon as I entered, I sensed something was wrong. My wife immediately bombarded me with questions about work. I asked her why she even cared, and she mentioned that I had left a large flask and lunch bag in the front passenger seat of my van, insisting that something was off today. I was on the verge of lying, but I was too fatigued to maintain any semblance of pretense. I simply admitted that there was indeed something wrong. Last night, while putting her to bed in her drunken state, a message had appeared on her iWatch, revealing everything and portraying her as a disgusting cheater. I wanted nothing more to do with her. Her demeanor shifted from a powerful, arms-crossed stance to that of a frightened little girl in seconds. She kept claiming to be great at keeping secrets and pleaded for sex, making her utterly repulsive. I read everything, and she began sobbing. I walked away and went upstairs to take a shower. When I returned, she was still crying on the top step, immediately launching into excuses about being drunk, vulnerable, and never having done anything like that before. She insisted he had messaged her first, that it meant nothing, and that she would never go through with it. She echoed everything others were saying, almost as if she had rehearsed it, except she didn't try to blame me. She likely knew I would have thrown her out if she had attempted such a thing. I informed her that I wanted a divorce and that she needed to leave the house within a month, also assigning her to the spare room. Since then, I've mostly ignored her, merely scowling and shaking my head whenever she rambles nonsense. I have no desire to listen to her explanations. She slept in the spare room last night, and today I haven't spoken or texted her at all. If I'm fortunate, she might be gone when I return from work, but I doubt my luck. To expedite her departure, I explained the situation to my parents. My mother was adamant that I wasn't going to throw her out onto the streets. She and my father are very close, and they've always been supportive. We've been together for 11 years, and in December, my mother insisted that I had made a mistake and that we should resolve things like adults. She believed my wife hadn't done anything significant and that the situation was exaggerated. She fully took her side, which I couldn't believe. How could she? Do I have no right to ask her to leave if my mother opposes it? The house is set to be mine after my parents pass, and since I did nothing wrong, I have no intention of leaving. This is likely to escalate into a War of the Roses Part 2. I managed to secure an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week to discuss my options. Until then, I'm continuing to ignore my soon-to-be ex-wife, knowing she probably won't admit anything else. Whether she was a good liar or just manipulating him for an affair, I'll never know. 20 days have passed since I discovered my wife's attempt to cheat with my friend, and the situation has become hellish. I gave her a month to leave, and she's been staying in the spare room, but it's clear she has no intention of moving on. She has also ingratiated herself with my mother, leaving her with nowhere to go, but that's not my concern. I've consulted my divorce lawyer multiple times and am now in the process of drafting a divorce petition and having my wife served with divorce papers. I've also opened my own bank account and taken 50% of the funds from our shared account. The atmosphere in the house is bizarre. The living room has become a no-man's land that no one frequents, and we both spend most of our time in our separate rooms. I've been intentionally working late to minimize interactions with her. Initially, I was completely ignoring her, but after learning about the 180 approach, I've started to implement it, remaining civil yet somewhat cold towards her. I'm grateful I did because I was beginning to feel like a monster, refusing to acknowledge her existence. It wasn't the right way to handle things, and I ended up feeling like the one who had wronged her instead of the other way around. The only time I deviated from the 180 approach was last week when I walked into the bathroom and found her sitting on the floor by the bathtub, crying. I helped her up and gave her a gentle hug, more of a there than a loving embrace. The sad part is that I'm now so suspicious of her that I wouldn't rule out her waiting for me to come home just to put on a performance. Maybe that's not even true, but that's the toxic environment my mind has been operating in. She's been boasting about doing anything to save our marriage, anything to prove it was just a silly mistake. I suggested a lie detector test, but I have no intention of taking one myself. I wouldn't even know where to start. I just wanted to see how she would react. Initially, she agreed, but a few hours later, she approached me with a tablet in hand, arguing that lie detector tests are inaccurate and that anxiety and nervousness can produce false readings. Considering her anxiety disorder, I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't a normal chuckle. It started as a cackle and ended in a childish giggle. It seems she would do anything to save our marriage except take a lie detector test. Regardless, it doesn't matter. As I mentioned in my original post, all the love I once had for her dissipated after reading those horrible messages. I no longer see her as my true love, the person I could confide in and trust with my life. Instead, I see her as trash that needs to be removed before it causes further decay. Jacket Holder has become the talk of our friend group since I exposed him a few weeks back. It's safe to say he's left us all and has been completely ostracized. I've tried calling him multiple times, but he refused to answer and eventually blocked my number. That deceitful rat, I hope it was worth it. I've spoken to my mother several times about this, and during a heated argument, I asked her why she was taking my wife's side. Was there something she wasn't telling me? What did she expect us to do, live like roommates as if nothing had happened? It's absurd. She insisted she always saw my wife as the daughter she never had but always wanted. My mother had a stillborn daughter before I was born, and it deeply affected her. She latched onto my wife and has continued to do so since we got together. As I mentioned before, they share a close bond. The fact that my wife doesn't have any family and only a few friends with their own busy lives means that if I threw her out, she would be completely alone. My mother believes that's unacceptable, especially during a pandemic. She tried to persuade me to compromise, suggesting that in 3 or 4 months, we could reassess our mental states and consider couples counseling before finalizing the divorce. I'm not interested in that. The thought of spending Christmas in the same house as my wife makes me feel sick. She will undoubtedly want to do it right, as she does every year, turning it into a complete disaster. My father, a man of few words, has always been quiet, proud, yet timid. My mother's opinion has always carried more weight in our household. People online have been telling me that I'm being selfish and spoiled, arguing that it's not my house and I have no right to make demands. But now, it's a choice between my wife and me against my parents. If worst comes to worst, I'm prepared to walk out the door and never return. I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror with some self-respect, and someone needs to uphold their end of this debacle. If I leave, my friend has offered me a place to stay for a few weeks until I get sorted out. However, if I walk out, I'm done with my parents. I'll never speak to them again. They'll likely see it as me giving up on them, abandoning them without even trying to fix things first. I view it as them choosing someone who broke my heart over me. Logistically, once I'm gone, she'll be staying there alone, my parents caring for a backstabber while their own flesh and blood is left to fend for themselves. A little more information about the house. My parents allowed us to move in a year after our wedding, which was supposed to be a belated wedding gift. Although they were always planning to move out and have us move in, I've invested tens of thousands into the house over the years. That's beside the point now. I fantasize about leaving all this behind, starting anew somewhere else, but I have nowhere else to go. I've lived in this town my entire life, it's all I know. Am I being too harsh? I'm literally ready to cut ties with my parents completely, but I feel so torn. Why am I the one who has to lose everything and everyone? I've tried to be a good person, always believing that you make your own luck and that good things happen to good people. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I deserve everything that's happening to me. Update 2, it's now been 20 days since I discovered my wife's attempt to cheat with my friend, and the situation has escalated into pure chaos. I gave her a month to leave, and she's been confined to the spare room, but it's evident she has no intention of moving on. She's also managed to charm my mother, leaving her with nowhere else to turn, but that's not my concern. I've consulted my divorce lawyer multiple times and am now drafting a divorce petition, planning to have her served with divorce papers. Additionally, I've opened my own bank account and withdrawn 50% of the funds from our shared account. The atmosphere in the house has become bizarre. The living room has turned into a desolate no-man's land that no one visits, and we both retreat to our rooms most of the time. I've also been deliberately working late to minimize any interactions with her. Initially, I was entirely ignoring her, but after reading about the 180 approach, I've started to implement it, remaining civil yet somewhat distant. I'm relieved I did because I was beginning to feel like a monster, refusing to acknowledge her existence. This wasn't the right way to handle things, and I ended up feeling like the one who had wronged her instead of the other way around. The only time I deviated from the 180 approach was last week when I walked into the bathroom and found her sitting on the floor by the bathtub, crying. I helped her up and gave her a gentle hug, more of a there than a loving embrace. The sad part is that I'm now so suspicious of her that I wouldn't rule out her waiting for me to come home just to put on a performance. Maybe that's not even true, but that's the toxic environment my mind has been operating in. She's been boasting about doing anything to save our marriage, anything to prove it was just a silly mistake. I suggested a lie detector test, but I have no intention of taking one myself. I wouldn't even know where to start. I just wanted to see how she would react. Initially, she agreed, but a few hours later, she approached me with a tablet in hand, arguing that lie detector tests are inaccurate and that anxiety and nervousness can produce false readings. Considering her anxiety disorder, I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't a normal chuckle. It started as a cackle and ended in a childish giggle. It seems she would do anything to save our marriage except take a lie detector test. Regardless, it doesn't matter. As I mentioned in my original post, all the love I once had for her dissipated after reading those horrible messages. I no longer see her as my true love, the person I could confide in and trust with my life. Instead, I see her as trash that needs to be removed before it causes further decay. Jacket Holder has become the talk of our friend group since I exposed him a few weeks back. It's safe to say he's left us all and has been completely ostracized. I've tried calling him multiple times, but he refused to answer and eventually blocked my number. That deceitful rat, I hope it was worth it. I've spoken to my mother several times about this, and during a heated argument, I asked her why she was taking my wife's side. Was there something she wasn't telling me? What did she expect us to do, live like roommates as if nothing had happened? It's absurd. She insisted she always saw my wife as the daughter she never had but always wanted. My mother had a stillborn daughter before I was born, and it deeply affected her. She latched onto my wife and has continued to do so since we got together. As I mentioned before, they share a close bond. The fact that my wife doesn't have any family and only a few friends with their own busy lives means that if I threw her out, she would be completely alone. My mother believes that's unacceptable, especially during a pandemic. She tried to persuade me to compromise, suggesting that in 3 or 4 months, we could reassess our mental states and consider couples counseling before finalizing the divorce. I'm not interested in that. The thought of spending Christmas in the same house as my wife makes me feel sick. She will undoubtedly want to do it right, as she does every year, turning it into a complete disaster. My father, a man of few words, has always been quiet, proud, yet timid. My mother's opinion has always carried more weight in our household. People online have been telling me that I'm being selfish and spoiled, arguing that it's not my house and I have no right to make demands. But now, it's a choice between my wife and me against my parents. If worst comes to worst, I'm prepared to walk out the door and never return. I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror with some self-respect, and someone needs to uphold their end of this debacle. If I leave, my friend has offered me a place to stay for a few weeks until I get sorted out. However, if I walk out, I'm done with my parents. I'll never speak to them again. They'll likely see it as me giving up on them, abandoning them without even trying to fix things first. I view it as them choosing someone who broke my heart over me. Logistically, once I'm gone, she'll be staying there alone, my parents caring for a backstabber while their own flesh and blood is left to fend for themselves. A little more information about the house. My parents allowed us to move in a year after our wedding, which was supposed to be a belated wedding gift. Although they were always planning to move out and have us move in, I've invested tens of thousands into the house over the years. That's beside the point now. I fantasize about leaving all this behind, starting anew somewhere else, but I have nowhere else to go. I've lived in this town my entire life, it's all I know. Am I being too harsh? I'm literally ready to cut ties with my parents completely, but I feel so torn. Why am I the one who has to lose everything and everyone? I've tried to be a good person, always believing that you make your own luck and that good things happen to good people. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I deserve everything that's happening to me. Update 3. Today, I no longer consider that house my home. I noticed on the calendar that my wife had a hospital appointment with her ophthalmologist, so knowing she would be away for a few hours, I seized the opportunity to gather my belongings and move out. After packing and organizing my things, I left the house keys on the kitchen table along with the divorce papers I received from my lawyer last week and headed out. I blocked both my wife's and my mother's numbers, deciding that any future communication with my wife would be handled through my lawyer. Regarding my living situation, I'm still staying with a friend for a week or 2, but I hope to secure my own rented place before Christmas. I haven't spoken to my parents in a few weeks. The last time we communicated was via text. I tried to explain to my mother in explicit detail the hurtful things my wife said in her texts to Jacket Holder, why it affected me so deeply, and why her comment about being great at keeping secrets shattered my trust in her. My mother responded by saying she couldn't speak to me while I was in this state and would let me cool off. A few days ago, she tried calling me, but I ignored her call. As mentioned earlier, I've now blocked her number. I feel utterly let down by my parents, and this betrayal feels almost worse than my wife's infidelity. The way I'm feeling right now makes me doubt if I'll ever speak to them again. In times of crisis, you look to your family for strength and support, but my parents have been weak, making me feel like the one in the wrong, as if I'm overreacting and tearing the family apart. That's not the case. I never asked them to move mountains for me, just to remove my cheating wife from the house. They made their choice, and my father had the opportunity to stand up for me but didn't. He made his choices, and now I have to live with them. People have been criticizing me online, saying I gave up too easily, that I was looking for an escape, and that I didn't love my wife enough to try harder to save our marriage. But that's not true. I love my wife more than anyone on earth, and I was utterly broken when I discovered her betrayal. Everyone has boundaries, and once those are crossed, things change irreversibly. When I read those horrible texts, something inside me changed. I fell out of love with her, as if being snapped out of a spell in a movie. Any attempts to salvage our relationship after that were merely delaying the inevitable. I'm curious about the dynamic of their relationship now that I'm gone. Will my parents continue to support her, knowing she ended their relationship with their son? As for me, I'd love to travel. My wife hated flying, so most of our holidays were spent in southern England, places like Newquay, Toke, Cornwall, and Devon. It would be wonderful to travel abroad again. Update 4. It's been over 7 months since I first posted on Reddit, and I genuinely thought that was the end of my journey. I didn't need any more advice. I had made my decisions and acted on them. However, this morning, I received a phone call that dragged me back into the turmoil I had hoped to leave behind. I have moved 15 miles away, changed my phone number, and I'm still in the process of divorcing my wife. She has completely ignored all requests from my divorce lawyer to cooperate, which has significantly hindered the process. We are now in the process of applying for service through the courts to have her officially served with divorce papers. If she continues to ignore them, I can proceed with the divorce without her input. This morning, while at work, my friend called to inform me that my father was trying to reach me because my mother is unwell. He asked if he could give my father my number, and I agreed. My father called to tell me that my mother is in the hospital. She's stable but not doing well, obviously. I was shocked because I hadn't heard my father's voice in so long, and it was the most emotional I had ever heard him. He told me that my mother really wants to see me and asked if I would meet him at the hospital that evening to visit her together. I agreed and arranged to meet him outside the hospital. However, I ended up going home from work because I couldn't concentrate. My mind was racing, wondering if I had made the right decision or if I was about to get dragged back into the nightmare I had tried to escape. I felt incredibly nervous, lacking control over the situation, which sent my thoughts spiraling in every direction. It felt like walking into a burning building blindfolded, with no idea where the exits were. Why does she want to speak to me now? Has she had a change of heart, or has she undergone a personality transplant while in the hospital? I find that unlikely. Will my wife be there? I have no interest in ever seeing her again. I'm still furious about what happened with her and my friend, and how they sided with her over me. I debated whether to attend the hospital visit at all, considering asking if she wanted to speak over the phone instead, but I wasn't sure if she would agree or if she was well enough. I feel like the villain here and worry that I might have caused this by walking away. How should I handle this? Update 5. Over the past few days, I've been trying to process everything that happened and my feelings about it. Ultimately, I decided to go to the hospital on Wednesday night after much hesitation and turmoil. I was genuinely about to back out at the last minute, feeling utterly overwhelmed, but I needed closure and knew I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't go. Something might have happened if I didn't. When I drove into the hospital parking lot, I felt a wave of paranoia, half expecting my wife to jump out from behind a bush or something. I met my father at the entrance, and it was pretty awkward as he tried to hug me, which I declined. I then told him that if my wife was there in any capacity, I was about to leave immediately. He assured me she wasn't, and we proceeded to the ward where my mother was being treated. Seeing my mother in such a state was terrifying. She looked like she had been through hell. She had a severe black eye, numerous bruises, and discoloration on one side of her face. She had taken a serious fall, breaking 2 ribs, shattering her elbow, and hitting one side of her head and face on the ground. The sequence was elbow first, then ribs, and finally her head and face. She looked zombified but brightened up when she saw me. She expressed how much she missed me and that she wasn't sure she'd ever see me again. I told her that if she had really wanted to reach out, she could have done so herself. We talked for a bit about what had happened and how she was down for a few hours before my father found her. She was determined to return to normal and mend bridges with me. I mentioned my wife and that I had been pushing for a divorce, but she was either ignoring the letters or not receiving them. I asked if my wife was still in the house, and my mother admitted she was, which made my father uncomfortable. I looked away in disgust. My mother began saying how lost my wife is without me and that she's not in a good place. I realized then that nothing would change. My wife hadn't had any sort of revelation or newfound perspective. She just wanted things to go back to how they were. My mother insisted that the house is my home and always will be, but I told her I don't want it anymore. It means nothing to me now, only holding bad memories. I stayed for less than an hour. When I left, I told her that if I wanted to get in contact, I would, but not to expect me to call, as she might be waiting for a long time. When my father walked me out, he asked if I would keep in touch with him, and I said I would. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not sure, time will tell. Once I got home, my emotions were all over the place, shifting from sadness to anger, but I'm glad I went. I couldn't help but think about my wife and what she once meant to me. It still hurts when I reflect on everything that has happened over the past 7 months. It doesn't feel real. The speed at which everything fell apart was astonishing. Life can hit you hard, especially when you're not paying attention. I wasn't, and it was sheer luck that I discovered her infidelity, a cosmic coincidence, nothing more. I never saw the signs or connected the dots. I just saw something on her watch that tore my life apart. I now know it wasn't the only time. Deep down, I feel it in my heart. I see what she truly is and feel no love for her, only contempt. I believe she stole the best years of my life. When I think about all the good times, they are now tainted. It feels like someone else's life, not mine. A friend suggested I see a therapist to process everything and prevent it from fundamentally changing who I am and how I build relationships in the future, which I intend to do. I do feel a bit broken inside. The last 7 months have been the worst of my life, but I'd rather they happened than remain in the dark. I'm just hurt that it unfolded the way it did, but you can't control how someone betrays you. I suppose you just have to learn from it. I recall reading about how loyalty is the most undervalued character trait, and now I understand why. It's because you don't truly know if someone is loyal until they are not. It's not something you deal with daily, but now, more than ever, I recognize its importance. Update 6. I'm now in the final stages of my divorce from my wife. She has signed the divorce papers and sent them to my lawyer, so all that's left are the formalities. She sent me a message through my father, apologizing for not letting me move on, saying she thought she could save things but now realizes she can't and needs to move on for her own well-being. I thanked her for seeing reason, clarified that she doesn't get anything in the divorce, and mentioned that she plans to move out once she's on her feet, which I'm okay with. Regarding my mother, I haven't spoken to her yet, but my father mentioned she's doing much better after being discharged from the hospital and regaining some normalcy. I'm uncertain how things will progress with him, but I've stated that if the house is going to be mine, I want them to transfer it into my name now for security. After that, we can attempt to rebuild bridges, though I'm unsure how that will go. My biggest battles lie ahead in my mind, trying to overcome everything that has transpired. The brain is a fascinating yet frightening organ. For instance, I can still taste the truffles I ate and then threw up at my grandmother's house when I was about 5. I've never eaten truffles again, but I can still taste those lingering sensations 30 years later. What I'm getting at is that I don't want to harbor thoughts, feelings, and opinions about everything that's happened decades down the road. I don't want to become one of those older individuals who reminisce about the good times overshadowed by life's pains. You often hear about people who were once good, kind, or funny but, due to certain experiences, have been forever changed into someone they never wanted to be, with nothing left but pain. I don't want to be that person. I need to let this pain go before it consumes me. I've started therapy and spoken to a psychiatrist both over the phone and in person, which has significantly helped me express everything candidly, even if only for a little while. My psychiatrist also shared something that really resonated with me when I lamented how my best years were behind me. She said, "Your best years are the years you've got left." I believe she meant that the past is gone and only exists in your mind, while the present moment is real and you can choose to make the most of it or dwell in a past that no one else acknowledges. It's a phrase I'm determined to remember for when I feel down. In one of my previous posts, I mentioned wanting to travel, and that's finally happening. My friend has committed to joining me, and we're booking a flight to New York at the beginning of October for a week. I'm really looking forward to it. I've always wanted to see New York when the leaves change, reminiscent of that movie, You've Got Mail. I hope this is just the beginning of my adventures. I want my late 30s to be filled with memories from escapades abroad. That's the plan, at least. For the first time in what feels like ages, I'm waking up with hope in my heart and walking with a spring in my step. If that's not progress, then I don't know what is. Update 7. It's now been a year since I first posted on Reddit, and I thought it was fitting to give one final update and conclude my journey here. First and foremost, I'm officially divorced. It feels like a huge weight has been lifted, but it also marks a definitive end to nearly a third of my life. About a month ago, I saw my ex-wife for the first time since last December while walking into a shop in the town center. After visiting a friend, she was opening the door to walk out just as I was walking in. We were both wearing masks, but I recognized her immediately. We made brief eye contact, and she mumbled something I couldn't understand. We stared at each other for a few seconds before I walked inside. As I browsed the shop, an overwhelming sense of sadness enveloped me, and I had to pause to compose myself. It just goes to show that all it takes is one look to transport you back to square one. Do I miss her? No, I miss the person I once thought she was, but that person doesn't exist anymore, if she ever did. I don't wish her any harm or hardship, though. I truly don't. I simply refuse to move forward with hatred in my heart. The only person it burdens in the long run is me. I also learned from a friend's girlfriend that she was certain she saw my ex-wife outside a pub in the city with another man a couple of years ago. She never said anything to me or my friend because she wasn't sure it was her and didn't want to meddle. I'm extremely angry with her because I could have confirmed if she was out that night, which would have saved me a lot of heartache in the long run. Now I understand why I've never liked her. One of the reasons my friend and I wanted to book a flight to New York in October was that travel restrictions between the USA and the UK were supposed to lift in September for fully vaccinated travelers. Unfortunately, that has now been postponed to November 8th, putting our plans on hold. Additionally, my friend can't get time off work until the new year, so if I go, I'll have to go alone, which is disappointing since we were both invested in going together. However, I'm determined to go in the new year with him. I'll have to think things through more thoroughly. The pandemic has consistently thrown curveballs, so I really can't complain or say I'm surprised. I'll get there, though, by hook or by crook. This is just the start of my journey in that regard. Remember, I'm still struggling with my parents. All I feel towards them is complete apathy. I'm just having a hard time feeling anything, and no matter how hard I try, I don't think that'll change. My father has tried to rebuild our relationship, but I simply don't care anymore. That might sound harsh, but it's the truth. In my last post, I mentioned wanting them to transfer the house into my name, but I haven't followed up on that. I think I was just angry at the time and wanted to assert some dominance at the beginning of our conversations, but I really couldn't care less about that house. I'd rather live in the house from A Nightmare on Elm Street than stay there. It wouldn't change anything anyway. It can't turn back time or undo what they've done. It's just the sad consequence of their choices. To anyone out there considering forgiving a cheater, please don't. I implore you, don't be that person desperately trying to put out fires started by your unfaithful partner while they gleefully reignite them. I feel stronger than ever after everything that's happened, and reading numerous infidelity support forums over the past year has taught me that you're setting yourself up for immense pain if you don't cut your losses. It's a relevant story, but at the start of the year, I had a terrifying experience when I cut the back of my trouser leg on a metal bin while brushing against it at work. I didn't realize it caused a cut until I got home and went to bed. That night, I felt strange and woke up around 2 a.m., feeling like my leg was pulsating. I felt deathly weak, was seeing double, dizzy, and alternating between a severe fever and chills. I immediately understood it could be sepsis, so I called an ambulance. They said it would take over 2 hours because it was a Friday night and there was a high call volume. My thoughts were racing at lightning speed as I hyperventilated uncontrollably. The only thing that calmed me down when I was freaking out was accepting that I might die. For some reason, I just didn't feel afraid anymore. I don't know if it was the acceptance of fate, but once I realized it might be over, everything became simple and calm. I've been reflecting on it a lot lately, and when I think about cheating and betrayal, I feel very similar emotions. You have to accept that what you had is over, it's long gone. If someone is willing to plunder such depths and stab you in the back so mercilessly for their own gratification, fighting that unwinnable battle is noble, but with the odds stacked against success, is it worth the pain? I don't think so. I understand everyone has their own situations with kids and other responsibilities, but some fights are just sheer folly. Accept that it's over, and things will quickly become clearer. That's just my perspective. It's funny, I haven't written about my thoughts and feelings since high school. I work as a roofer, and this experience has coaxed out a side of me I had pretty much forgotten existed. If anything good has come from this fiasco, it's that I'm not going to bottle things up any longer. It's been cathartic for me to get things out there and see the bigger picture of my situation. Writing things down has helped me more than I ever imagined, so I plan to continue doing so, even if it's just journaling or using a notepad. I believe there are moments in life when you can put a pin in things and recognize that they were on a knife's edge, capable of going either way. I shudder to think what would have happened if I hadn't reached out for help here or if I hadn't encountered those dog walkers. I'd likely have been blackout drunk on death's door in a ditch somewhere or in jail for trying to harm Jacket Holder by smashing his window frame after wreaking havoc in his house like a tornado. Honestly, it scares me to think where I'd have ended up if things had gone south. I was in no good place, and being drunk, embarrassed, and incandescent with rage is a combination that can lead to chaos. Whatever the outcome, I'm just grateful I made it out the other side without harming myself or someone else. Most of my posts have focused on the intricacies of what was happening, but the last few have delved more into my feelings about the events. Betrayal evokes such passionate and invasive thoughts. There's no action on earth quite like it. Being stabbed in the back by people you love in so many ways is unique, and the emotions you feel afterward are equally unique. So, cheers for listening to me out. In my first post, I mentioned feeling like a worse person than I was the day before. Well, after everything that's happened, I also feel like a stronger person.